All right. Thank you, James. Everybody give James a hand. So appreciative when he can come and do this. It just sets a lovely tone. What do you think? I do. Haymitch is over here. There's Haymitch. We'll switch places in a sec. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. I appreciate it. Doesn't work so well if we don't come. Do you want to come up in the front row? You just come up along there. Look, we got. Okay, I got a straight shot. All right. There's a loner Allen over there. Okay. Let's see, Ed.
Yeah,
I'm gonna do your
welcome. We love it. You guys bring your wonderful spirits here and all the wisdom that we find from people who present and share. And please, everybody, I know Haymitch would love everyone to share their wisdom, right? Abundantly. And we like that. Everybody's got something to say, and I like to hear what people have to say. And so welcome. Bathrooms right in the hall. Thanks again.
You. I don't know if you can see Kristen back there hiding, but she's the other great half of this hosting home with Ed. So thank you again. We really appreciate you opening your home to us. Let's see. And thank you, Kristen, for helping manage Zoom. Jane, my wife, usually does that, but she's at another event tonight. She'll be coming late. And of course, thank you to Haymitch for being here. And for creating an amazing book. You know, right before I came earlier because I had to go to this thing with my wife up at the University of Utah, Jane. And as we left the Iversons here, it would have been, I don't know, 5:30 or so. I look up at Mount Olympus. Maybe you guys saw that because you were up that way doing your cold plunges in Mill Creek. Anyway, it was just strikingly beautiful. You know how, I mean, a lot of you guys live around here. So when that sun hits just the tips of Mount Olympus and grandeur, and it was just breathtaking and heavenly. We're so fortunate to live here. And the air was super clean and clear. And it did make me think a little bit about your book, Friend of the Devil, because the only reason we have that kind of a moment, and people in art, especially that work in paint and stuff like that, but even poets, and the light and the darkness together, that's what makes the magic happen, right? And you kind of point to that in here with this mysterious title that I'll let you talk about, Friend of the Devil, which you really kind of only get really into that towards the very end, which is kind of fun. But I do recommend this book. I've got it dog-eared. I think Haymitch did a very good job of taking a very difficult topic in a personal friend's life and trying to extrapolate and mine it for the beauty that it is. So well done.
Thanks.
This is your kind of first major book, right? Not counting the children's book.
Yeah.
Which was another beautiful book. So anyway, if you haven't gone to the website, or you don't have it, you can come to me after, ThinkAgain-FaithAgain.life. Anyway, it's got Haymitch's bio. By the way, Haymitch went to school with Ben and you, Martina, same year, Skyline. No,
He's 1 year older.
Oh,
We just
you?
established.
Yeah.
Okay, established. And then I didn't realize you had a connection with persons.
Yeah.
So Ed was your scoutmaster?
Yeah. I mean, among other things, it was just like he was a presence in the neighborhood.
Well, yeah.
In a good way.
No, I'm sure he's still a great presence,
Yeah.
not just the neighborhood, but schools that he works in and all kinds of stuff. Both Kristen and Ed are. So Kristen, do you have anything going on with the Gandhi Alliance?
Not specifically, but we are it's time to stand up. I hope that, maybe, you're convinced to the, invitations to write, to call our representatives every day even. There, you can get a script to call on and, so.
Where would they find this, where would we
I'm trying
find the
to remember
script?
the name of this, it's called Chop Wood, Carry Water, you know, after like, just do a little thing.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Chop wood
and
carry
the
water.
phones have been really busy, a lot of people are calling and in some cases making a difference. Another thing we have is, these cards that, immigrants, every immigrant should have one. It tells them their rights. And on the back, it has, they can hand this to an ICE agent that says, I do not wish to speak with you, answer your questions, or, you know, sign anything. Anyway, if you're interested in taking any of these cards to give to people you know, or then we have some. You want to pass them?
Thank you. That's wonderful. So that's the Refugee Justice League, I think, put those out, right?
Yeah, that.
Yeah.
and a couple more.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Thank you very much. All right, well, we're gonna turn it over to Mitch, so take,
Hot seat.
take the hot seat.
All right. It was funny seeing myself. I have my notes up here, so hopefully that's not too distracting. Yeah, I'm really honored to be here. I'm finally feeling mostly warmed up from Thane. Took me to jump in Mill Creek just a few hours ago, so we were mostly warm, and then as you were describing the setting sun on Mount Olympus, Thane and I both had like our right index finger was still numb on both of us for some strange reason. So he got out the drums and we circled up with his kids and had a little drum circle, and so now I'm feeling mostly warm.
Should I turn the fireplace on?
If I go pale halfway through, kick it on, or if I'm getting, boring, then kick it on, that'll help too. It's nice to see faces I don't recognize and many that I do. Ryan's great to see you. Thane, like I said, we were just plunging. Catherine, Janice, so good to see you all. Yeah, Ed and I go way back. I'm nervous to ask if Ed has any stories about, I'm sure I was getting into trouble as a kid, but yeah, it's good to reconnect.
It was always full of energy
Yeah.
and always good vibes, good vibes.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Thanks, Ed. Before we do much else, I really want tonight to be experiential. Something that I guess something that bothers me a lot about like education or church or gatherings of any kind is like we tend to be so in our heads, and that's a beautiful thing, the capabilities of our mind. But I really want us to have an embodied experience, and so just to start, I'm just going to invite us into a little meditative experience, if that's okay. You can just settle into a posture that feels comfortable and try to have as vertical and straight a spine as possible. Just to allow yourself to be both relaxed but attentive and alert. Just take a few deeper than usual breaths here to begin. Just allowing whatever frantic pace we may have been going throughout the day with to just slow down. Allow our truer nature to catch up, to take center stage. You can notice any sensation throughout the body. Maybe there's pain in your left knee, tension in your shoulders or neck. Maybe your right index finger is mysteriously numb. Instead of thinking about the body, just allow awareness to emanate from the body in direct experience. No way to do this right or wrong. And gently, even a bit slowly, just allow awareness to concentrate in and around the breath. That is the experience of breathing in and out of the nostrils. You might notice a sensation of coolness with the in-breath or warmth, the out-breath. You might call forth a sense of awe and wonder that breathing has always been happening for you. Not something you have to think about, but something that just sustains life. The foundation of life upon which you can pursue all of your interests and relationships. And now you can just let all of that go. Gently come back to the room. You can open the eyes if you haven't already. Just notice how you feel now. Maybe it's different, maybe it's not. I wanted to start with this settling in meditation so that it's a place that we can return to often throughout the night. We'll build on this as we cover a topic that even after writing a book on it, I'm still not sure what self-forgiveness is. But I know that practicing it feels good in my heart. And so I continue to try and figure it out, to try and experience it as much as possible. And I find that grounding in stillness is really the heart of that practice. I do want to cover some of the points of the story. Like I said, I don't want to talk too much, but I think it's a helpful foundation for why we're gathered here, why you came. In 2007, February of 2007, I was a senior in high school. I was driving out of Parley's Canyon right here, and I got a phone call from a friend asking if I had heard about a mutual friend, Cameron, that he had been in a car accident the night before. And I wasn't aware of that. My thoughts immediately went to, oh, I hope he's okay. You know, what caused this car accident? And really just concern for my friend was like the initial feeling. I would come to find out that Cameron had been driving under the influence of alcohol. He had been crossing town to meet up with some friends and had veered across traffic and had crashed into another car head on. And in the oncoming car was a family, Chris Williams, his pregnant wife, Michelle, and 3 of their kids. And many of you probably know the story or have seen like the forgiveness video that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints made about it. And in that crash, Michelle Williams died. She lost the unborn baby. Obviously, it was 7 months developed, and 2 of the 3 kids passed away in the accident as well. It was a tragic thing. I still sort of get goosebumps just thinking about it. And anyone, for those of us who were in this area at that time, it just kind of rippled throughout the community. It's like everyone knew someone that was somehow involved in or affected by that accident. The true miracle of the story was that a few days after, Chris publicly, in a press conference, publicly offered Cameron forgiveness, which is its own conundrum. That the whole evening could be dedicated to just exploring that, and I think it'd be a good use of our time. Chris wrote a book about the incident from his perspective called Let It Go. I think that book came out in 2012. And I highly recommend it. It's a beautiful, work of art that really takes you into his perspective and what life has been like for him and his family since the accident. The premise of my book, Friend of the Devil, was that project began when Cameron reached out to me, little over 7 years ago now. And he was in a pretty good place in his life. And, I'll cover some of the details to get there, but he felt like there was unresolved feelings in his heart, and that there was not closure to the story, which Chris later confirmed when he helped us on the project, saying that, whenever he talks to someone about this accident, usually the last question that people ask is, what happened to the teenager, right? Like there's something in us that wants to know that Chris's forgiveness meant something, and that Cameron didn't just whatever with his life. And so they had gone speaking together for a while, which was a wonderful thing. And at some point, Cameron felt like, I really just need to move on. Like I need to not keep opening the wound. I need to step away from this. And so a book became an opportunity for him to, do his part of the story justice, to like do his part, but not have to be in the public eye all the time. And I just happened to be his friend who, I don't think I'm a great writer, but I like to write. And so somehow we connected, and he trusted me with telling the story. It took us 6.5 years to complete it. And I'll just go over some of the points that we cover in the book. I have copies here if you're interested in not paying shipping. You can always order it online, but I brought some physical copies if you want one. The story kind of picks up for Cameron after the accident. He comes to and realizes that his Jeep is flipped over and that he has no idea what's happened. He starts feeling around in his jean pockets with a phrase that keeps running through his mind saying, find something sharp, find something sharp, find something sharp. Also scattered with like, I'm missing a shoe, where's my cell phone, find something sharp, right? His mind keeps coming back to that. And he's frantic. He knows that something bad has happened, but he has no idea what that bad thing is. He sees a chain link fence, and his brain says, the points on the end of that chain link fence are pretty sharp. So he runs over to the chain link fence and starts clawing his wrists along the top of it, essentially trying to, as I say in the book, fade to black. He was trying to end his life. And details like that, as his friend, were impossibly difficult to hear him tell me as we went through the process of writing this book. But as like the one who had taken on the responsibility of writing the book, I knew like, this is what I need to know. And this is what I think will make this book, worth reading, is that like we really tell the story as it happened as best we can. He felt like he had gotten deep into his wrists enough to bleed out, and then he just started walking down the street waiting for his life to end. That didn't happen. Fortunately, he was detained, arrested and taken down downtown to the detention center, where they read him his rights, and he went through this whole sort of booking process, but he was still inebriated, right? He didn't have any idea what was going on. And so then he told me how the next morning he woke up and sort of had to re-experience all of that with a more clear mind. He had, a conversation with his parents. Oh, should I admit this person? Welcome.
Thanks.
He had a phone call with his parents, which was a heartbreaking telling of, like that's the phone call that no parents want to receive, is that their child has been out and they caused a fatal car accident and now they're, detained. And he says that was one of the lowest moments, was just he could hear his mom's heartbreak on the other side of the phone call. He was in DT for 3 months. In those 3 months, he turned 18. So when the accident happened, he was 17. And this really became the crux of his sentencing hearing. There was no jury because as a minor, it wasn't like, is he guilty? He pled guilty, and it wasn't like, is he guilty or not? It was a question of, will he be tried as a minor or as an adult? In both cases, the judge said he would get the maximum sentence. So as a minor, that would have been until his 21st birthday, so about 3 years. If he had been charged as an adult, it would have been something like 67.5 years in prison based on, 4 counts of vehicular homicide. So you can imagine, actually, maybe we can. Even as I wrote the book, I really tried to put myself in his shoes. In fact, we even wrote the first few drafts in his voice. So I was sort of like method acting what it must have felt like to try and get into that space, that headspace. And honestly, there would be days where I'd write for a few hours and I would feel depressed at the end of the day, because it was like, without reminding myself consciously that I hadn't done this, that was like the weight that I carried around for the next, until I was like, oh yeah, this is not my burden to carry. He was ultimately tried as a minor and sentenced to the maximum till his 21st birthday in a juvenile detention center. There's a few of them in the valley, and when you get that sentencing, or that when you get sent to one of those places, you basically just wait for whichever one comes to pick you up. He ended up going to one called Wasatch, and really it got even darker from there. I think he just didn't, he was a kid at the time, and I talk about that in the book, that not to excuse his behavior at all, because he would be the first person to take full responsibility, but just to explore, when I was in high school, mental health was not, yeah, and most of you who are older than I am, you just didn't, that wasn't a common thing you talked about as teenagers. And so in hindsight, I think this book offered an opportunity, again, not to excuse anything he did, but just to explore what he had at the time was a clinical diagnosis of anxiety. And he was working with a therapist and taking medication to deal with that, but it clearly wasn't solving the issue. And so he got the opportunity to have therapy in Wasatch, but he didn't know how to seize that opportunity, right? He was still a teenager, still highly anxious, and on top of all that, he had caused this accident that was just causing, complete and utter brain fog, heart fog. Slowly but surely, he did start to make some progress with his therapist. He said a big aspect was family therapy. When his family could come in, people he really trusted, and they could tell him, they could shoot straight with him and really let him know, hey, this is what we're dealing with as your family members, right? And so that was he was starting to practice empathy, starting to break down some of these barriers that had calcified around his own heart. Ultimately, his therapist had the idea to invite Chris Williams in for a therapy session. Cameron said that idea absolutely terrified him. I use this a little aside, but I at some point writing the book, I used the model of the hero's journey to tell Cameron's story, which is a bit ironic because he's like completely the villain of the story, right? But it was amazing how it's still sort of like tracked with that like mythological arc. And that like crux of the hero's journey, this step is called like atoning with the father. It's like a literal moment where Cameron met with Chris, with the supervision and facilitation of his therapist to encounter Chris person to person and to hear what was on Chris's heart and how he was dealing with everything. And to Chris's credit, he didn't shy away from that. He mentioned that he had real fear about hindering Cameron's progress in some way, but ultimately he felt like this was the best thing for Cameron to go in and meet with him. And he didn't, another thing to his credit, he really didn't hold back, right? Like he let Cameron know how this had affected him. And I think that's the kind of honest conversation. I don't know about you, for me, I'm always avoiding those conversations in my life. That's like all I'm doing is like avoiding the things that might be, heartbreaking. But that's one thing I learned from this story is like if and when we can lean into those opportunities, those conversations, those encounters with our closest friends, family, neighbors, political rivals, those are the things that like soften us and that ultimately allow us to forgive ourselves from what we're dealing with. I could say a lot more, but just to kind of wrap up what the territory I cover in the book is ultimately, like I said, Cameron and Chris went public speaking once he got out of DT. That was a really healing thing for Cameron for a while. And then he sensed that he had to move on. We cover in there about his experience of dating and ultimately finding a partner. He's married and they have 2 beautiful children. All of those beautiful moments in his life, he says, are mixed. It's like a 2-edged sword because the greatest moments of his life are now just deeper realizations of what he took from Chris in that accident. And so that's kind of his life is dealing with that on a daily basis and, being recognized sometimes in public. And ultimately how the book ends is and how the hero's journey ends, right, is like this desire to be anonymous, to just like blend with the universe of things. And Cameron, I think, to the best of his abilities, is doing that in a beautiful way. He, like I said, he's raising his daughters. He works in real estate and just lives a pretty quiet life. So this book is an attempt to allow him to continue to do that and still, offer closure to a tragic but very beautiful story. Before we move on into some more, experiential practices, I just wonder if there's any questions that any of you have about the story, about the book or the writing process. I just want to hold a few minutes here in case anyone has questions they want to explore before we move on.
I might have missed this, but how old was Chris at the time?
How old was he? Oh, that's a good question. It's not in the book because I feel like normally when I get questions, it's like my mind will go right back to all the research and stuff. I don't know. I think mid-40s is, I'm gonna guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, his oldest son was in high school at the time. I think a freshman in high school. Yeah. Yeah, Jay.
There's some really painful moments to read in there. What you just alluded to. His dating, what you call his dating career, went terrible
Yeah.
until
Yeah.
he was introduced by a friend.
Yeah.
His sister,
Yeah.
and that made it work.
Yeah.
But I don't know if he had ever gotten married.
Yeah.
It's going.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that not happened.
Right.
But even, once he did marry this wonderful woman, like you say, it was hard
Yeah.
because he realized what he took.
Yeah.
And then with each birth of each child. So it was sweet on one hand, because he was so excited to hold this, infant in his arms,
Yeah.
and then as they grew, and it sounds like, he's had over the years, that is always, those two things walk side by side all
Yeah.
the time. The joy of the moment And then this remembering of what that moment meant to somebody else, Chris, and how that was taken away.
Yeah.
And how in the end brave, really courageous Cameron is.
Mhm.
Particularly when he was first going around doing these talks, I think he didn't say Skyline, but it sounded like he went back to Skyline to give a talk to
Yeah.
the kids, and then the teacher railed on him,
Yeah. Yeah.
like he should still be in jail.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, for a young guy like that, it'd be super hard,
Yeah.
but he kept going.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
It's, I mean, there's so many moments like that
Yeah.
in the, as I read his journals and we would go to lunch weekly and he would just let me interview him on any and every subject and just, there's so many little moments like that where as one of his closest friends, I thought I knew sort of what he was going through and I had no idea. Yeah, it was his health class at his own high school that he had gone back to, a teacher that he had had.
Nice.
And I think she was totally entitled to her own feelings and opinions. Like, I don't think that was necessarily wrong of her to do that. But it was heartbreaking to hear Cameron's experience of dealing with it, of, his own community. Because those are the stories we tell ourselves when we make a mistake, right? Is that, oh, I'm no good, everyone's blaming me. And then to have someone else in the community validate those stories.
Publicly,
Publicly.
you're trying to make amends.
Yeah,
You're more generous to her than I am. Right?
yeah, maybe,
Maybe if you
yeah,
wanted to say something on the side privately, maybe, I don't know.
yeah,
But you're, towards the end of the book, you talk about the value of non-judgment,
yeah,
if you want to forgive
yeah. I think
yourself.
it becomes everything I say tonight is not like, I don't know the answers about self-forgiveness. Let me start with that. And yeah, like I do think in my experience going through this book, writing this book, that does seem to be a critical element to self-forgiveness is deep equanimity and acceptance of life as it is. And that, I mean that like writ large, like in every facet of life. Because we experience the world as individuals. So it's like, if we can't apply that lens to ourselves, we can't necessarily apply it to anything else. Yeah.
It must have been really a struggle for you to write this book and to hear these stories from your friend. How did you get through the hard times?
Leon has traveled the furthest to be here.
Mm.
Way
All
out.
the way from Boise, Idaho.
And he's got great questions.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I don't know, honestly. Like I said, there were times when I felt very depressed, especially when I was writing in his voice. Ultimately, that didn't feel right. And it allowed Cameron a little more distance and anonymity for me to rewrite it from my voice. What occurs to me is someone asked a similar question when I did a book signing. They said, how did you keep your fingerprints off of this and just tell the story factually as best you could? And in that moment, it occurred to me that my fingerprints are all over this book. That like this, if anything, this book is like my own process of the grief that, I was experiencing, like a minuscule amount of what from like the epicenter of the thing. But even being on the periphery, this book is sort of like an attempt in some ways for me to process that grief. In fact, each chapter I sort of end with like, I shift gears from telling the story as Cameron was relaying it to me to like my analysis of it. So, yes, I would point you to the book to really experience that. Some things that come up though are like, it definitely changed the way I thought about Jesus, who's like Jesus is a big figure in my life. And so that became a transformative way of understanding Jesus and the Gospels. And that's just one thing that occurs to mention. Yeah, please.
I have plenty of issues trying to figure out how to forgive myself. It's not something I do well. But it is ironic that in our culture, and it's basically at least the broader Christian culture that I know well, that perhaps it is in the root of not being able to forgive ourselves. We really love to seek out who's doing wrong somewhere else
Yeah,
and to hammer on that. And we
Yeah.
want to see them, we want vengeance.
right.
We want payback. You know, and a teacher screaming at a child or a young man like this is in that same mindset.
Sure.
And it's the mindset that is making it difficult for me to actually interact with my own family,
Yeah.
my siblings.
Yeah.
And so hopefully there's something there that that I can hear some insights tonight
Yeah.
about how do we deal with a culture who doesn't want forgiveness?
Yeah.
And how that does stop, as you mentioned, Cameron, how you get through that when you're struggling to do that yourself, and then you get that loud voice saying,
Yeah.
you shouldn't be forgiving.
Right.
So that's a big question in my heart tonight.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, Ed,
I have a question about Williams. What was his first name?
Chris.
Chris
Yeah.
Williams. You know, I want to tell myself because of my faith that I could do the same thing that
Right.
he did, but I don't understand how I could possibly do that.
Yeah.
And do you address how he did that and what power it had to help Cameron?
I initially I tried to, and I just want to pinpoint what your question was, and I want to respond to this.
sorry, yeah.
No, that's great. I want to respond to this because I think that's wonderful too. And then that was a great segue into what I want to do next. I just wanted to sort of let you know where we're headed for a minute. Yeah, I think I tried to, and pretty quickly, like I thought that Chris's forgiveness, I thought by like talking to Cameron, I would figure out what that meant, and that Cameron would be able to tell me what that meant, and then I could extrapolate those principles, and the book would be something like, here's how to forgive, ABC, you know? Like, I think I genuinely thought that that's where this project was headed. Pretty quickly, it's like, oh, this is something else, right? This is not philosophies, this is not frameworks, this is not, I think the way I say it in the book is that when that happened, Chris's heart shattered into a million pieces. It broke wide open. And if we imagine the heart as something that can break open, well, then the contents of whatever's in that container are free to spill forth into the world. When Chris was a teenager, he had, like, I think it was his first job, he was delivering medical supplies to Shriners or the U of U or something. And he was driving along the road, not inebriated, right? He didn't break a law or anything, but he did strike a young child who died in the accident. Two little boys were playing in the street. And Chris hit one of them.
This is Chris Williams.
Chris Williams, yeah, when he was younger. And the boy was killed. And you know that I think at some point the family wrote him a letter and you know said, we forgive you, we know this was an accident. But I think that was something that was in Chris's heart. And that was swimming in his heart for years and years and years. So when his heart breaks, and that kind of pain but also love is in there. Again, I'm not speaking factually, I'm speaking metaphorically or poetically or something, that like that's what came out when his heart broke, was just like the pain and the universal pain and suffering that gets passed on by us as humans because we're just bopping around trying to do our best, but we're you know, we're colliding with each other, and like the pain and suffering is just part of the equation. And so yeah, I have no idea what enabled. He does say, you know, on multiple occasions I've heard, and he says it in that Mormon Message video, that he wanted Cameron to know that any goodness that Cameron felt from this forgiveness, that he should know that it wasn't him, right? The way his words are, it was merely Jesus acting through me. You know, and you can understand that however you will, but like it, yeah, something else that's not a. I wish it were like a framework, because then, you know, I'd be like preaching the gospel of forgiveness in that way, but I just don't know if it works that way.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I guess I wanted to circle back to your point because what I feel to do is like just call us back to an awareness practice, a meditation. And I'll just start by saying, like, notice the feeling in the room. Like, I even have between my shoulder blades like tension right now, because it's a lot, this is not like easy stuff to talk about necessarily, especially if there are some of us in the room who are like have really tender hearts and we're dealing with our own grief or loss or pain or suffering. So I just want to take us back into that foundation that we built of just observing the breath. And allow the breath to be like a pump or a transformative chamber through which we can move this energy. With each in-breath, feeling into where our bodies might be storing the tension, the sadness, the grief of this story and the stories we're living. And then with the exhale, the out-breath, just really concentrating on releasing any tension. Again, not in the way that the mind will understand it, but just trusting the body's intuition here. Trusting that our hearts can hold this for a moment and then release the energy back into the universe. If you need to exaggerate the breaths, that's absolutely okay, to just really process this tension. I'm actually going to play a song while we continue to meditate. And it's just a melody, a humming melody. And you can just hum along and allow the toning, the tonal vibrations to continue to move this energy. Just go for a few minutes. I invite you just to hum along. Kind of toning really calms the parasympathetic nervous system. Allows us to relax at deeper and deeper levels. As we process this story, allow anything that's coming up for you personally to move with the same energy. Continue to relax, to breathe. Feeling clear, you can start to move energy for the rest of the world. Thank you. And again, just notice how you feel. There's another big takeaway. One of the biggest takeaways for the experience of writing this book and diving into my own self-forgiveness is just realizing that I think I used to think forgiveness was something like thinking my way to salvation. Like once I figured it out and got all the insights, then the road was paved for me to walk through the golden gates. Now I see it more as the direct embodied experience of this moment, that forgiveness is waiting to be claimed, that it's here and it's now and it's in our bodies, and that, you know, by moving energy and by practically letting go of things, we can start to relax into a deeper, truer sense of ourselves.
What's that quote that you used from Martin Luther King? Forgiveness.
Oh, I can't even quote it. Yeah.
It basically says what you just said.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there a,
I look similar.
maybe I'll find it.
You said this.
Okay, yeah.
You did good.
Yeah, if you can get yourself
You
a
did
copy.
good.
1999. What I want to do now is an experience that I worked with a lot in graduate school. I studied education. And we would do this maybe you've done this before, but I'm going to invite all of us to stand up and sort of spread out between this pillar and that by the orchid. Is there space sort of just behind? Actually, let's do
Lots
it.
of
There's
space.
more space right here. Let's do it this way. I'm going to turn the camera so that folks can see that way. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read 3 statements. And just like if you were taking a survey, one end of the room is strongly agree, and the other end of the room is strongly disagree.
So we will move after you make a question.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll read these one at a time, and then you move according to how this statement lands for you.
Which direction is
Great.
Strongly agree, strongly disagree, and anywhere in between. And just feel free to place your body on that spectrum in a way that feels true to you.
It's kind of the MAGA on the right and the.
Sorry. Mine is, it's all perspective. This is my left. My right. Okay, the first statement. Self-forgiveness requires befriending one's inner devil. Self-forgiveness requires befriending one's inner devil.
I read the book, so that's why.
Yeah, you know how leading this activity really is. Yeah, and let it, again, I haven't given you any premise for what these statements mean, so just trust yourself here. Self-forgiveness requires befriending one's inner devil. Okay, great. Now I'd love for some volunteer sharing. Why are you standing where you are on the spectrum, and what can you tell us about your perspective, your opinion? Please, Martina.
I feel like I've had the dark night of the soul for the last year of my life,
Yeah.
and I have had to face really dark parts of me. And so I can't help but agree.
Thank you. I feel Martina like continuing to move the energy for us, right? By like feeling what you're feeling, like all of us get to move that energy with you. So thanks for teaching us. Jana.
So I've also had a dark night of the soul. I've been working through it probably for the last 11 years. For me, I think I spent the first part of my life, most of my life, really hating deeply parts of myself and being very ashamed of them and trying to run from them. And it has only been in my practice of just embracing whatever this is that has moved me through it to a place where I can truly say I'm very comfortable with myself today in a way that I never thought was possible before. That's why I'm hugging the wall over here.
You and your inner devil are close.
We are.
Yeah, let's move more this direction.
Well, it's how I interpret it, the Navajo legend or story about the boy who goes to his grandfather and says, and the grandfather says to the grandson, you have 2 wolves within you. One is a good wolf and one is a bad wolf, and they're fighting.
Yes.
And which one will win, Grandpa? And Grandpa says it's the one you feed.
Yeah.
Okay. And so to me, befriending, the bad wolf is kind of like feeding it. So I don't want to feed it.
Yes.
So-
Yeah, please. Sure, yeah.
You're not the big bad wolf.
So I think that is a completely valid way
Yeah.
to reach that destination.
Yeah,
I just don't think that there's only one way,
yeah,
because I've experienced a different way in the last year.
yeah,
And that way is to actually trust that Christ will take it on
mm,
himself.
Mm.
And that you can let it go without coming to peace with it.
yeah,
And that letting go actually does work.
yeah,
Now, I think both might be necessary in the long run.
yeah,
So that's not a disagreement,
right,
but I think there are multiple pathways
yeah.
that all work.
Yeah, and I think I see some other hands. This is a great example of how I hope these questions, by framing them as polarities, to reference John Kepler, Yoda. Hopefully upon further contemplation, we realize like, oh, there's actually just a continuum of oneness here, right? That however we're seeing this, there's many ways in. Yeah, did I see a hand in the back?
Oh, I was just gonna say that, when you kind of divided this up, I don't think I took any side, I just ended up with this crowd of you.
Yeah,
Kind of sat down in the back, but
yeah,
I think like what Jana was saying, I just have to, add on to that, it's just. Having a period of. Holy. Sorry, I never know what group I'm in. But.
You're in a group that loves you, Tom.
Thank you. And then. I had to get to a point where. I'm gonna let this thing just take on the life that it is. And. When I said. This is what it is. So just kind of. I hate saying lean into it and surrender and just, all that, but. That made it a little bit easier for me to. Get up above whatever it was that was dragging me down.
yeah,
But I don't think it's this side or that side.
yeah,
I think it was just, here it is.
yeah,
And when I recognized, sorry, I'll be done in 1 minute. When I recognized that it was just something that. This is the form it takes on.
yeah,
I was out running, I was out walking and I had that like, oh, holy hell moment,
yeah,
epiphany and stopped.
Yeah.
And it turned a little bit of a corner, but I don't know of these two.
yeah,
Pillars?
perfect, yeah,
I think it's just my pillar.
yeah.
And I'm not trying to be like, oh, he's free spirit. Jay knows me.
He's a free spirit.
But it's just, no, I agree with Jay. And I agree with this other person here tonight, this other gentleman, but I don't know. I don't think it was I had to point to any filter or any one person,
Right.
Christ figure or a deity, as
Right.
much as I just pointed. Here's what's happening right now. And that's a unique experience to kind of like not interpret it through other lenses.
Yeah,
If I can use that, and not that it's
of course,
wrong
right,
for anyone, because I've done that before where I
Right.
go, oh, I've been there, God has been there with me and
Yeah.
helped me.
right,
This is more like before God,
yeah, beautiful,
listening to that going, oh, wow, I never heard that before.
yeah,
And it's scary than you know what.
yeah,
So that's my
thank you,
take.
thank you. I think I saw James's hand and then, yeah,
Oh, I was thinking about, right? Thinking about that,
Talk to the ladder, will you, James?
oh,
Or come up.
that,
Another dark.
that story, where the health teacher really spoke strongly to, well,
Cameron, yeah,
I had a different reaction, I thought that was fair.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that whether they're defending the devil, you should look at that
yeah,
clearly
mm,
and let that come. And that woman is, I mean, sometimes we confuse forgiveness with people liking us again, or
Right.
it's not that. And the only way you can deal with, I think, that is to be with dignity and honesty. I think not bringing the devil, but facing the devil.
Yeah.
I had an experience. I had taken a large amount of mushrooms, and I was with my then girlfriend.
Yeah.
Not my wife, and she was. But I was.
She's on the other side of the room.
And I remember I was struggling with something that it was a little bit disingenuous.
Mhm.
And I saw this figure or this face. I said, seen that kind of face in some art that we bought in Mexico. And I remember, but it looked at me, it wasn't smiling, and it wasn't frowning, but it was looking clearly at me, and it was basically saying, you're better than this. You are, I don't dislike you. I don't like you necessarily. I mean, I do. I deeply recognize who you are, but you are better than this, and you can face me and be there. And so often we hide from frailties, or I've always, I think, tried too hard to please people or be what they want.
Yeah.
And I think really, for me, you have to face the health teacher calmly and honestly, and listen and be there.
Yeah.
Whatever that means. And that health teacher is neither good nor bad. But that's what it means to me. So.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks, Seamus. Yeah, one final comment here.
Yeah, when you first asked the question, I froze a little bit, and so
Yeah.
that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
But the question is basically, in going through the process of self-forgiveness, do you need to, or does it help to get to know the devil within, right?
Right.
And so
Yeah.
my things, I don't actually mind you that much.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's a great point. And are you done? I don't want to cut you off.
no, that's it.
Okay, yeah. You invited me to talk about the title a bit, so I'll just put this in here that it's actually based on a Grateful Dead song. The Friend of the Devil. Yeah. I think early on in the process, we had a working title that was like, Climbing the Mountain of Hope, right? A fine title and so forgettable, in my opinion, right? And that was, we were working with Deseret Book at the time, and ultimately we went a different direction. But that song for me captures this beautiful picture. It's a story of a guy on the run, right? Who's like, can't find rest, he can't sleep, he can't get any satisfaction because he's a friend of the devil, meaning the devil's like always close by trying to. And so the sense that I wanted to evoke with the title and with this insight in the book is that, like, if there's one thing that I'm sure of about my own process of self-forgiveness, it's that if I'm running from my feelings, I'll never find satisfaction. I'll never find peace. That it's by feeling those feelings that love can actually fill the holes in my heart, right? Because that's ultimately what I mean when I say the devil within, is it's those parts of us that we don't want to look at, that we don't want to love, right? Which, like, one of those for me is like my emotional relationship to food. It's been that way my whole life, and I don't know why it's that way, but like there's this dance that I do with it, and I don't like to look at it. But when I can look at it, when I can come into communion with it, something better happens, something more constructive, something more beautiful. Okay, next statement. This is great learning. You have the authority to forgive yourself for your mistakes. You have the authority to forgive yourself for your mistakes. Strongly agree, strongly disagree. It's getting crowded over
That's
there.
amazing. I got there'd be people going that way.
Me too.
It's interesting.
Authority.
You have the authority To forgive yourself your mistakes. Okay, a couple comments. Why are you standing where you're standing? Maybe like
Catherine's in the middle.
That's what I'm looking at,
I
like
wanna hear
people who've moved. Why did you move? Catherine, you don't have to. Would you be interested in sharing?
I'm finding words very difficult, like the majority of this evening.
Yeah.
I'm like in a different, like nonverbal space.
Yeah.
I mean, it's yes and no. It's sort of like acknowledging my limitations and the limitations of what I can see and perceive and what I'm capable of holding.
Yeah.
While also tapping into the self that is eternal and the self that is a mirror of the divine.
Yeah.
And within that network of the divine sort of mirrors and selves and souls,
Yeah.
I'm sort of at that mercy.
Wow. Yeah.
And I'm honored to be at that mercy.
So beautifully said.
Jane had her hand up.
Oh yeah, please.
Well, I can't
Jane.
even if I'm in a verbal state. But I got a little hung up on the word authority.
Yeah.
Maybe other, particularly women did. I mean.
On July.
So I would like to change that for myself and say you have the gift.
Yeah.
To forgive yourself.
Yeah.
That is more, it resonates with me more.
Beautiful. Thank you. I actually feel authority, like capital A authority just stepped into the room and was like, I want to change myself to gift. And like no, like I'm being very genuine. Like, thank you for showing up and teaching us as the voice of authority. Like this is like my Thomas McConkie impression, right? Like as the voice of authority, thank you, authority, for like showing up and teaching us that. Like that really matters to me. And I'll say, like, as the author of this book, I did pick that word very intentionally because it felt triggering to me.
Okay.
Right? I want to read a paragraph that I think it really highlights the paradox of this. Like, I love that you place yourself in the middle of this paradox. I hope that this can only add to what's been shared so far. I wrote this in my introduction. This book is meant to invite you to walk the road of healing in your life. I hope by reading these pages you become aware of the unconditional forgiveness God is always giving you, which in Greek was charizomai, meaning grace, as well as the self-forgiveness that is conditional on your willingness to let go of the suffering you carry. In Greek, aphiemi, meaning to send away. Perhaps we can all eventually reach the point when the receiving of divine grace and the giving away of our suffering becomes one fluid motion, a mystical flow of forgiving love from God through humanity and back to God. Yeah, please.
I don't think you can really believe that others can forgive you until you forgive yourself. You have to be able to really believe you can forgive yourself, or you're not going to believe other people can forgive you.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
And maybe God most of all, right? Like until we find inner peace, like however you understand God, seems like it's at the end, it's at the back of that line of others that can offer you forgiveness. Jenna.
First of all, I'm shocked I'm over on the wall for 2 things.
Yeah.
Because I'm usually finding myself in the middle of all of these lovely things.
Yeah.
But I feel really strongly about this kind of stuff. And you said it much more poetically there.
I had 6.5 years to write it, so I had time. Yeah.
Beautifully refined. But I would say that for me, that spoke to me for why I'm over here, is because that mercy, that divine, that's there.
Yeah.
It's up to me to believe that I have the authority.
Yeah.
To let that in, to believe that I have that agency.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, Ed, and then we'll go to the last
Over
statement.
here.
Yeah, thank you.
And I need to tell you. To me, there's no way I can forgive, okay?
Yeah.
You know, Madonna wrote a little kid's book about, I don't know if you remember it, but this little child told gossiped, okay? And anyway, she was told that basically what she did is opened up a pillow and let all the feathers out. And this wise man said, well, can you go get all the feathers, you know, and put them back in the pillow? No, you'll never be able to do that. I feel like I have a wake of feathers that I've strewn all over the earth, and there's no way that I'm gonna make everything, atone for everything, and make everything right. It's out. So you say I have the authority. I don't have the ability. Okay. I believe it's outside myself. It's really, it is God and it's others. I believe the atonement is a group thing. It's like, hopefully you'll forgive me for throwing out, you know, and hopefully God will forgive me, and hopefully Christ will help atone that, but I can't. I can't. I don't have the authority or the ability.
Yeah.
I'm way over here.
It's beautiful, right? Like I hear you saying very similar things at opposite ends of the spectrum. And you know, and from right in the middle of the spectrum, and it's like,
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing.
Right. Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful. Martina.
I just want to say I'm triggered by that comment for some reason, and I'm trying to figure out why.
Yeah.
But I just keep thinking, if you won't, who will? And me fixing the mistakes, the feathers that you threw out, is very different from forgiving yourself. But when you're triggered, it's simply a shadow, and I am going to dive into that because
great.
It's very fascinating. Yeah.
Well, I guess I could say it this way: with Christ's love, I can forgive myself, maybe, but of myself, I can't.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, which I hear like this. I hear everyone pointing to this beautiful question, which is like, who am I? Right? Like, am I human or am I God? Like, and you know, I think that's what Christ represents, right? Is like, is he human? Is he God? Exactly. Right.
Well, I'm asking, who gets to decide where the feathers were supposed to be?
There's layers to this learning that I wasn't even expecting. It's beautiful. Thanks, Gianna. Okay. Do we have it in us for one final question? This is great. Mental health is a doorway to spiritual awakening. Strongly agree, strongly disagree. Mental health is a doorway to spiritual awakening.
Well, when you say mental health, positive or negative?
Well, both.
Is that depends, that'll define which end of the.
Intentionally vague.
It is a doorway.
Mental health is a doorway to spiritual awakening.
You said that. No.
A doorway. Good question. Still some mingling. I'll give you a second. One.
I'm the devil over here. Devil, don't trust me.
There's still some movement happening. I like that the movement there's some social elements to it. It's like, what are you? It's relative, right? Like, yeah. Like, well, you have authority, but I'm way past you. Okay, yeah. Anyone have thoughts?
Ambiguous.
Yes. Yeah, here and then here.
So if I had perfect mental health, there might not be room for growth. So I think it's good to like be striving, and that helps my spiritual growth. And I'm happy that I'm not. I'm in that kind of middle space where I can grow and have both form.
Nice. Great. Yeah, well said. Anyone else? Oh yeah. You.
So I live a roller coaster.
Okay.
And it's quite often that the low part of the roller coaster
is followed by a flood of inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's mania or not, I don't know, maybe it is. But, you know, a week ago Sunday, I was really down, I was really depressed. And on Monday, I got 6 pages of answers. That I had to just type as fast as I could go, because they were flooding in, and they flood in not as words, they flood in as ideas. And you're trying to figure out, how do I hang on to this? And so, much like artists have a tie to depression in their muse often. I don't think that there is a reason to think that depression cannot also jump us into a spiritual experience.
Well, I think it's, I think,
all these hands.
you know, it's what comes first, the chicken or the egg.
Yeah.
You know, I hate to say that mental head is gonna get me there first, okay?
Right.
I like to think that heart is gonna get me,
Yeah.
you know, there first, and so. Yeah, I believe it's more that your heart and spirit is gonna get me there before my head.
Nice. Kristen and Jameis, did you have? Okay. Jameis, then Martina.
Christ said, if you want to, find yourself, you need to lose yourself. And, I tend to think mental health, you know, it's kind of a superficial, contemporary notion about self-help and, you know, self-worth, whatever. I think, it's much deeper than that, and, yeah, so whoever said over here, out of, you know, crisis, and Karen and I have been reading also about sort of the approach of,
Little louder.
Karen and I have been reading, Karen's been climbing the Amazon retreat, and we read about these different approaches to how you view your place in the world, and I don't know that mental health is, as we understand, it's really necessarily. Well,
Nice, great perspective. Yeah, Martina.
I'm so fascinated by words.
Yeah.
Mental health. You guys are, it seems like, talking about being healthy. You said mental health, and I thought about how I have fallen apart. And I thought about anxiety. So I am like totally in alignment of, in my lowest points, it has become spirituality. But my interpretation of the phrase mental health is totally different.
That's why I asked that clarifying question. He said, well, you're gonna have to figure it out yourself.
Yeah, and again, like I hope anything and everything I'm presenting here is from like a ... question mark place, because I don't know. And as I dove into this story, I realized more and more how much I don't know. Because even like earlier, I was sitting in this chair saying, like, when I was in high school, we didn't talk about mental health enough. And then I'm like, well, I don't, like, is that really the fix here? Like, is that what I'm really, I don't know that that's necessarily the message I'm trying to send with this book. And it's like, I can't help but dive into the question and be like, what are we even talking about? Yeah.
Well, I think that's the good question. What are we talking about? Because some are taking it as an industry, as a method, as a purely cerebral thing.
Right.
And as for someone who works in wellness, I don't separate it that way. You know, for me, mental health and spiritual health are completely intertwined, and it's embodied. It's not just mental, you know, it's all of the things, but I'm being very specific with these questions, but I feel like it's a doorway. I have seen so many people improve their wellness and their mental health in a state of being, not an industry, not a, you know, not just mental.
Right.
And it's opened up massive possibilities in their spirituality. So I have to be over here. Of course, it's a gateway. It's a doorway for some, not everybody, but it is a doorway.
So you define mental health as bold. On that side.
Maybe you try to
Love this. Yeah, please.
Oh, well, I agree with so much of what you said, and I just like. I absolutely resonate with what you said on the other side of the road and definitions.
Yeah.
I need to move over closer to my wife.
It's always the answer. It's always the answer, that's right.
Like false dichotomies and the separations. And so I have been reading a lot about
indigenous approach to wellness. From in the Amazon, and how it's really about finding balance and what gets in the way, somebody finding balance and treating that. And, Western approach calls it mental health, and then, or you could call it spiritualism, but for me, the goal is connection. And when I see myself as separate from the whole, separate from someone who I've done wrong, or someone who's done me wrong, or separate from nature, separate from the healing forces, that's when I feel most alone and helpless.
Yeah.
But when I connect, not only do I receive compassion and love, but I also take responsibility, because I tune into the suffering.
Yeah. I'll just add this, and then we can regain our seats to close. But for me, this particular phrasing comes from the work of a scientist at Columbia University, Dr. Lisa Miller. I'm sure a number of you know her work, but she is a neuroscientist who has done a lot of brain imaging and other methodologies to look at the similarities between deep depressive states in the mind and how those are what she calls opportunities for an awakened brain. That those sensitivities are an actual like depression, like we're diving down deeper into whatever this cosmic experience is, and therefore it's a great opportunity for us. And that really demonstrated itself in Cameron's story, that in these depths it actually opened up so much possibility, not only in him but in the lives of his family and friends, myself included. So that's just a little insight on that. But why don't we take our seats, and then we'll close. Thank you. That was such good learning, and the reason I love that activity is it gets the body involved, but it also, like, I don't know, just always leads to rich, like I'll say opposition, but I mean that in the best way, There's some other things I wanted to do. We're out of time, so I'll just mention some practices you might carry with you to continue this, what I like to call the art of self-forgiveness. Things that really bless Cameron's life and that I've tried to make regular practices of my own. Journaling, to like really write down, like take time to take stock of like, what is it that I'm carrying unnecessarily? What are the like heavy bags I have slung over my shoulder that are really just weighing me down? Right, like I mentioned those two Greek words of like God's unconditional grace that's always on offer, on tap, and our conditional ability to let go of those things. Journaling and draw journaling, so like sketching, to like really get into a different part of the brain. Start to visualize, what is it you're carrying? What does it look like? Like I was testing some of these modules before tonight, and like I mentioned my emotional relationship to food. I like started drawing this cheeseburger. It was huge, it was delicious, and it just helped me like really get into it. Like, that's interesting, that's different. Another one is service. Someone mentioned like letting maybe it was you, Jameis, like mentioned like getting out of your own way, like forgetting about yourself in a sense, like there's, of course, like self-forgiveness is inherently focused on the self, and paradoxically it's so helpful to just like do something for someone else. And you'd be shocked how those bags just fall away. The things we carry just fall away. I could say more, but I wonder if maybe we just close with another meditation. This is a particular technique I love called centering prayer from Father Thomas Keating. It's a form of contemplative prayer. But you can approach it as prayer, meditation, whatever feels like it resonates with you. The notion is just to pick a sacred word, preferably something short and sweet. Examples might be joy, peace, love, God, wholeness. And for the purposes of our gathering tonight, allow that, like, give all of your self-forgiving efforts to this word, right? As if, like, if I chose joy, let's let joy be like the key to the kingdom that unlocks ultimate self-forgiveness for me. And just trust yourself here. It's not like you need to get this right or wrong. It's like, what word arises in your heart? And I'll just give you a second here to land on something. And we'll just come back into this familiar state where we began the evening of just breathing, noticing that breathing is happening. We don't have to think about the rights or the wrongs of breathing. It just maintains itself, sustaining life. Now we can just introduce our sacred word. Not as a concept or a cognitive thought, but as a placeholder for deep and utter transformation. Self-forgiveness, self-love, wholeness. Allow your sacred word to shower you capital J joy, capital P peace, capital G God. Become so awash in this word that all separation between you and it ceases to exist. Sit as joy. Sit in peace. Sit in the divine, loving embrace of God. Whatever God means to you. Rest in this light. Put down what you're carrying. Move closer to that eternal flame that's already within you. And as we move back into our individual lives, their various colors and themes, just recognize that this is who we really are underneath all of it. Thank you so much, everybody. It's been a real pleasure. Sorry we went a few minutes over.
Oh, Haymitch. Okay, that was so beautiful.
Thanks, Jay.
Too many people do a giant group hug. Giant group hug.
Was that your sacred word, giant group hug?
No, it would have been. Actually, mine was dirt and soil. Well, I don't know why. Thank you. And your book is a gift, so I highly recommend his book. There's a lot of what you heard tonight, but there's so much more that you missed. That I encourage you to take advantage of. And thank you for taking that long journey with Cameron.
Yeah, I feel like the journey took me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it sounds like it.
yeah.
It sounds like it. So coming up, actually next month, there's some similarities with tonight. There'll be some overlap. Let me just tell you who we got coming up next time. So Hannah Crowther, Faith Matters, published her book, Gracing. And so she's kind of, I've listened to a Faith Matters podcast with her and haven't read her book yet. But sense that there's an embodiment of this same kind of idea. So it should be lovely. Her title is Living into Creative Grace, the Biological Human as a Model for Everyday Gracing. So that'll be good. And then Esther Kandari, she's the one that's running the Compass Gallery down in Provo. She's a wonderful artist and thinker. So as I talked to her, this is kind of what I came up for a title, Jesus in Art and AI, How They Affect Our Image of God. So that should be interesting. And then May, so that was April, and then May, workshopping our spiritual journey through poetic writing. And that'll be Bryn Bagley Chipman, Right Sister Right. So maybe some of you have also signed up for her little poetry workshop that she's ongoing doing. She started a few weeks ago. Anyway, that will be really interesting. Yes, the question?
I was visiting your website.
Yes.
And don't you
His
offer
website.
retreats?
He does.
Yeah.
And I was gonna
Kinda
mention that
started.
next weekend, right? So talk about that.
So
Thank you.
next weekend got canceled,
Oh,
but there's another one coming up March 8th.
okay.
That'll be more focused on, no, the ones I've been doing are focused on creativity, but this one will be focused on the art of self-forgiveness.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
So it'd be like this
warm up.
Yeah, it'd be like this with a lot more dancing.
Oh, I love that. Static dancing or just dancing?
Some, yeah.
Some?
Yeah.
And no making the.
Definitely mud balls, always
Gonna
mud
make the
balls.
mud balls.
Yeah, we're always making mud balls.
No, and you laugh, but he makes gorgeous mud balls. I mean, you sell them with hearts.
I do, yeah.
That's a serious
practice.
Serious practice. Well, that sounds cool. So we'll send out another, so you can connect on the website to his Patreon and get connected to his emails and know when all these events are. So I highly recommend that. So thanks for asking.
Yeah, thank
Karen about that, because I wanted to touch on that. And then in June, have Lori Lee Hall. So you might have heard about her. So former stake president, bishop, LDS temple architect, church architect, who is a trans woman now. So she's gonna come and talk to us. And it'll be mainly because there's a lot of stuff you can listen to. She's online a bit. The podcast she's done because of her book that just came out. So it'll be a Q&A with her primarily. So that'll be interesting. So you can ask about her journey.
What month?
That is in June. And that's as far as I've gotten. So rest of the year, I'm not good. Anyway, thank you so much, everyone. I sure appreciate it. I mean, obviously, if you don't come, we can't have an experience like we had tonight. So really, it's, every month I'm going, is anybody going to show up? These people that I asked to come, I value so much, and I want them to feel like, that what they say matters and that people will come and listen. So I'm very grateful when you come, because it's this group effort, right? Somebody talked tonight about connections and how that makes things work. So thank you. All right, I'll show up. Thank you.
Nice.
Yeah, Venmo's great.
Yeah. Also, I really would like to.